role or responsibility I played was in 2019 when I was invited to write the history of Cross River Conference. This I thought was a little thing, but somehow little did I know that it was published on the Adventist Encyclopedia. So this is a remarkable thing for me as a minister. In 2016, I got married, and God has blessed us with 2 children. To Him be the glory. I got my ordination into full-time ministry on August 22, 2017. In 2002, I went to get a master's degree to enable me fully get ready for my CPE training. As God may have it, on November the 3rd, 2023, I moved into Canada to do my CPE. Currently, I am in my 3rd unit of CPE, and just this month, first week of June, I was approved for competency assessment. This is a huge one for me. Currently, my church membership is with the New Westminster Seventh-day Adventist Church in Burnaby, here in British Columbia, and I have had the privilege to move from numerous churches where I minister occasionally. But without further delay, I would like us to dive into the subject. Turn with me to your Bible if you have one, or you can just follow as I read on the screen, to the book of Isaiah chapter 60, verses 1 to 8. Isaiah chapter 60, verses 1 to 8. It says, "Arise, shine, for your light has come. The glory of the Lord rises upon you. See, darkness has covered the earth, and thick darkness is over the people. But the Lord arises upon you, and his glory appears over you. Nations will come to your light, and kings to the brightness of your dawn." It went further to say, "Lift up your eyes and look about you. All assemble and come to you. Multitude of camels will cover your land. Young camel of Midian and Ephah, and all from Sheba will come, bringing gold and incense, and proclaiming the praise of the Lord. All Kedar's flock will be gathered to you. The rams of Nebaioth will serve you. They will be accepted as offering on my altar, and I will adorn my glorious temple." Amen. I won't want to take much time, but permit me to look at 2 things from this text, light and darkness. Now, darkness, in the context of this Bible text, can be interpreted as the lack of the knowledge of God, which result in moral confusion and spiritual blindness. So one can assume that the book of Isaiah chapter 60 is simply saying that there is going to be the lack of the knowledge of God on the increase. It is also saying that as a result of the lack of the knowledge of God, moral conduct, confusion, and spiritual blindness will become the result. Darkness could also mean moral and social disorder. As we read in the book of John chapter 3, verse 19, it says, "And this is a condemnation, that light is come into the world, and men love darkness rather than light, because their deeds are evil. Light, on the other hand, it is, as we read in the book of Isaiah chapter 60, light is the result of the glory of the Lord. The result of the glory of the Lord is what is seen as light. And we are told also that Jesus is a light that has been revealed to this world. And so we can say that the rejection of Jesus, the rejection of God, is what is demonstrated in the book of Isaiah chapter 60, verses 1 down through 8. So light has been given, and even though light has been given, man has rejected that light. And because of this rejection of light, God is seeking to reconcile himself to the children of Ishmael. If you read the names of the nations that were specifically mentioned are the descendant of Ishmael. If you read the description of the nations described in Isaiah chapter 60, you will agree with me that God is in the business of reconciling himself to the world, or vice versa. He's in the business of drawing people, the nations who did not know him, back to himself. And the Bible specifically mentioned the descendants of Ishmael in that text. With this in mind, my brothers and sisters, the environment of British Columbia is characterized by diversity and secularization, which create a need for Adventist chaplaincy ministry, a much needed ministry to the spiritual, emotional, and social needs of the people beyond the walls of the church. British Columbia is a region distinguished by its cultural diversity and progressive secularization. The rapid decline in religious affiliation, as reflected in the growing percentage of the religiously unaffiliated population, underscore the critical need for effective spiritual care and outreach. In such a context, the need for Adventist chaplaincy has become glaring. Let's take a look at the religious landscape of British Columbia. British Columbia, like I have mentioned, is diverse and find the secularization very troubling to the Christian denomination. There is a decline in religious affiliation, which highlights the need for spiritual care beyond church walls. Permit me to look at some statistics about British Columbia. If you look at what we have on the screen, you can find this is the religious landscape of Canada as a nation. But interestingly, our aim today will be towards the western part of Canada, which is made up of Yukon and British Columbia. This is a map of British Columbia Conference, and it comprises of two provinces, which are Yukon and British Columbia. We find on this map that 59.7% of people living in Yukon identify as non-religious. They identify as having nothing to do with any religion. In British Columbia, 52.1% also identify as non-religious. Considering this, you can agree with me that there's so much happening, and this data was gotten in 2021. Now, it is astonishing to see what you have on the screen. A careful look at this table will help us identify that there was no data provided or available as at the time this information was gathered for 2024 and 2025. However, what we have is between 2011 and 2021. Between 2011 and 2021, we have for British Columbia a growing rate of 15.52% of people who identify as non-religious. And we have 16.83% between 2011 and 2021 for Yukon. So we see that if we had data for 2024 and 2025, it might be alarming what we will see. So we see evidently that British Columbia and Yukon is currently the unentered area in North America. And let me look further. Let me take us further as we look at this assertion. In all of North American division, there are three major regions that we can identify as being high when it comes to non-religious affiliation. The first one is Yukon in Canada, the second is British Columbia in Canada, and the third in this field is Vermont. So we see Vermont having 48% of people who identify as non-religious, but unfortunately, the two provinces in Canada that has the highest rate of population that identify as non-religious are both in the western coast, Yukon and British Columbia, and these regions make up the British Columbia Conference. So when we make the assertion that British Columbia Conference is currently the unentered area in North America, we can make reference to this fact as they are. A lot of factors are responsible for why this is happening, and while these factors are unchangeable, this presentation tries to find out what could be done to salvage the situation. The first on my list is modernization in a multicultural environment such as what we have in this part of the world. The second factor responsible for non-religious affiliation is an increased volume of education on criticism of religion. The third part is religious scandals, abuses, and misrepresentation of God. People have used religion to do a lot of activities, and this has caused other people who do not believe to question if indeed there is God. Another factor is division relating to theological issues. Christians hold the same Bible, but we interpret it differently. So these are some of the factors. And I would like to emphasize more on this last factor that has been identified here, population growth. Population growth is something the church cannot also control as well as others. Recent studies indicate that British Columbia cities now account for half of Canada's 10 densest cities, while Vancouver is number 1, New Westminster number 2, North Vancouver 3rd, Victoria 7th, and White Rock 9th, indicating issues around population density in British Columbia. So these are factors. Now, how is this affecting the church? What impact is this having in the church in British Columbia? We have 4 major areas where this is affecting. One is liberal versus conservative interpretation of the Bible. As a result of this, a lot of people have developed mechanisms, they have developed tools to help them understand the Bible in a way that will suit them, not basically the way the Bible authors may intend, as it were. Another impact is a growing number of people unsubscribing to Christianity. Not just religion as it were, but Christianity, a lot of people are unsubscribing to it. That is another impact. Another impact is dwindling religious commitment. Religious commitment among even the Christian denominations is dwindling. People don't take religion, Christianity, seriously anymore. It is more of a social gathering to some, and we see how that is also impacting the way the society is running. The fourth impact is that society, not religion, defines norms today. People tell you the Bible can no longer define what is norm for us, the society does. What can we do to reverse this situation? Let me read to us from Mind, Character, and Personality, Volume 2, page 764, paragraph 1. It says, to take people right where they are, whatever their position, whatever their condition, and help them in every way possible. This is gospel ministry. It may be necessary for ministers to go into the homes of the sick and say, I am not a physician, but I am a minister, and I like to minister to the sick and afflicted. Those who are sick in body are nearly always sick in soul. And when the soul is sick, the whole body is made sick. What a profound inspiration. We find from this reading that we may not be able to change the factors and make them good, but we can go to the people where they are, whatever condition they are in. In this case, they have lost trust in religion. We can go to them where they are and simply say, we are not here as physicians. We are not here to preach religion, but we are here to demonstrate to you that Jesus loves you. However, we may not mention Jesus loves you because that can irritate or trigger them, but it is an opportunity for us to come to them where they are and just be present with them. Our job is not to go out there and make the people religious. It is not our duty to turn people from their non-religious affiliation to make them begin to become Christians. No. Our job is to provide them with data about the love of Christ. That's our job. And when they get this data, what they do with it is between them and God. I read again from the book, Gospel Worker, page 363. I'm sure probably a lot of presenters will have this text read out, but permit me to still read it out anyway. Christ's method alone will give true success in reaching the people. The Savior mingled with men as one who desired their good. He showed his sympathy for them, ministered to their needs, and won their confidence. Then he bade them, follow me. Our responsibility is not to go change what is, but our responsibility is to mingle, demonstrate the love of Christ, and bid them follow me. And so, with the circumstance of British Columbia, with the non-religious affiliation, with the issues around secularization, with the issues around rejection of Christianity, Seventh-day Adventist Chaplaincy Ministry can do a lot. This is an opportunity to not talk about religion, but meet people where they are. Seventh-day Adventist Chaplaincy Ministry can reach the non-religious and spiritual but non-religious in BC and Yukon. Seventh-day Adventist Chaplaincy can bridge between the pulpit and the non-religious affiliation that we see rising on regular basis. There are lots of opportunities that the Seventh-day Adventist Church can explore in the area of spiritual care. The church can venture into homeless shelter and outreach programs. This will enable them to reach people and demonstrate the love of Christ. Other opportunities include mental health and addiction recovery centers. Immigration Refugee Services Chaplaincy can come up to support newcomers with cultural transition, trauma, and spiritual dislocation. Between January and October 2024, over 54,000 people immigrated to British Columbia. This is an opportunity for the church to create a chaplaincy ministry that will care for people, immigrants. Let me share with us an illustration of something that happens in the New Westminster Church where I belong. After the COVID, Julia started thinking on how the church can reach the community around us here. And so she decided to register with Canada Revenue Agency. She made her consultations, and then she and a couple of other church members came up to start the tax clinic. We have every year over 500 people who visit the Seventh-day Adventist Church tax clinic to file their taxes. I am told also that not just do the people come, but when they come, Julia and her team are able to sit down to provide what they did not know, but I see that they are able to provide spiritual care. They listen to the people tell their stories, and they encourage them, and it has always been wonderful. It costs about between $100 to $600 to file tax, depending on the size of family and whatever income the person may have. And so for Julia and her team, this became an opportunity for them to minister to people who, in a way that will make so much impact in their lives. This is Julia and her team from Westminster Seventh-day Adventist Church, who meet every year to file tax for people in the community. When I found what they were doing and how it aligns with the goal of chaplaincy ministry, I did not have a choice than to join this team. These are facts we need to know about what it means to have a tax clinic. From what Julia shared with me, tax clinics are basically sponsored by Canada Revenue Agency. Canada Revenue Agency provide most of the tools for this clinic. They do the training, and all that the church needs to do is to provide a facility and human resources. This is a wonderful opportunity for ministry that we have discovered. In the coming year, the plan is to train more and create more clinic centers in the lower mainland BC. And one of the things we have identified is with the fact that people come to file their tax and they spend 45 minutes to 2 hours before the filing is completed. And so while they are waiting, we are thinking subsequently of having a digital signage where we have a television to display our messages, advertise what we have to offer to the community, and then it's just there while the people wait. This last year's filing was interesting because we also had an opportunity to engage the children that came with their parents with a lot of activities which turned out to be very interesting. We also had opportunity where people moved from one table to the other, and I sat as a chaplain, was able to provide support to these people. There are other opportunities that the church can explore, which include the church can decide to train lay people, encourage lay people and pastors to become community chaplains. Adventist chaplains can be motivated to train as CPE educators who will in turn train Adventist chaplains to work in this part of the world. The church can create urban centers of influence where Adventist chaplains can provide emotional and spiritual support to people. We can go media by, establishing social media presence, podcasts, YouTube channels, with an eye towards spiritual care, mental health, and community support. We can create online forum or fora where those who are reluctant to meet in person can come. Issues of concerns can be discussed, and a lot of things can be talked about that will help their spirituality. To conclude this presentation, British Columbia's multicultural population and secularizing trend makes a case for chaplaincy ministry. Chaplaincy services are needed to engage the vulnerable and marginalized population who are religiously unaffiliated, but yet are not aware of their need for a Savior. Adventist chaplains can uniquely relate to non-religious and spiritual but non-religious people in British Columbia and Yukon. The chaplain's response to a world in crisis is a suiting opportunity for the church to respond to the spiritual, emotional needs of British Columbia population. Let me leave us with this quote from Medical Ministry, page 319. It says, "A new element need to be brought into the work. God's people must receive the warning and work for souls right where they are. For people do not realize their great need and peril. Christ sought people where they were and placed before them the great truth in regards to his kingdom. As he went from place to place, he blessed and comforted the sufferings and healed the sick. This is our work. God will have us relieve the necessities of destitute. God would have us relieve the necessities of the destitute. The reason that the Lord does not manifest his power more decidedly is because there is so little spirituality among those who claim to believe the truth." Thank you for having me.
aquí está el título, es el título de la presentación. All right, well, thank you for your patience with this confusion. Apparently, they double booked the room, and that's why we're not upstairs. And so hopefully people won't be upstairs thinking that they're listening to what I'm saying, and then they realize it's not. So since they gave us the bigger room, I'm not going to start until all the chairs are filled out. No, I'm not going to do it. So again, thank you for spending the time with me. Let's just begin with prayer. Father God, I thank you for your goodness to us, for allowing us this opportunity to be together. And Father God, I ask you to give us a clear mind and give me the clear words to express what we have prepared. In Jesus' name, amen. So I know that all of you are chaplains. Some of you experience, especially in hospital and hospice, and some of the things that I will be covering, you will probably do better presenting it than I'm doing it. But bear with me, and hopefully you will learn some things that will be useful to you as well. So let me tell you what kind of background we're going to have here. The goals first is to talk about the feelings and reactions of law enforcement officers dying of a terminal illness and their loved ones. Why law enforcement officers? Because I am retired from church work, but I continue to serve as a volunteer chaplain in law enforcement. But it doesn't matter. It applies to the military, to hospital, to hospice, et cetera, et cetera. The second goal is to understand the final stages of the dying process. I was a hospice chaplain, as you're going to see in a minute, so that's why I can talk about that. To help law enforcement officers diagnosed with terminal illness to write the final chapter of their lives. And goal number 4, to help the survivors after the death of their law enforcement loved ones as they navigate the journey through grief. Some time ago, when I was the men's ministries director for the North American division, I was asked, what qualifies you to do that, to be the men's ministries director? Kind of a challenge in a way, you know, what qualifies you to be the men's ministries director? And I said, well, I'm a man. I think that's a good enough qualification. Well, in this topic, I think I can have a little bit of say because I have done it. I've been there. This is not just theory. It's not just things that I read in some book and I'd like to present to you, but I have been doing it for many years. So it just as a matter of understanding where I come from. So I'm a retired pastor after 40 years of ministry. The last assignment was at the North American Division as the Family Ministries Director, Men's Ministries Director, and Single Adult Ministries Director. So I retired in 2023 from the North American Division. I'm a trained marriage and family counselor. That's what my master's degree is in, counseling psychology. Been a law enforcement chaplain for 39 years in 14 different agencies. Member of the ICPC. ICPC is the International Conference of Police Chaplains. I think right now we're at around 2,500 chaplains all over the world. Been a hospital chaplain, been a hospice chaplain. So I think I have a little bit of experience I can talk from and not just simple Bible or head knowledge. So currently I'm chaplain for the FBI, for the Federal Bureau of Investigation out of the Kansas City office. Been with the FBI for the last 10 years. And just recently I became the chaplain for the Missouri State Highway Patrol Troop F, which is in Columbia, Missouri, which is moved to Missouri in August last year. So that's why I just got connected with the Missouri State Highway Patrol. So I want to talk a little bit about what happens in law enforcement death by year. If you look at this, doesn't cover every year, but you see the number of deaths, line of duty deaths by law enforcement chaplains. By the way, before I go any further, this is an hour-and-a-half presentation which I have to consolidate into 50 minutes. So if you allow me, please, I'm going to try to cover as much as I can, and then at the end we can ask questions. If we get sidetracked with questions, then we may not be able to cover everything. That's number one. Number two, the entire presentation is printed out, so on the way out, you're welcome to take the presentation with you. And I think it's also being recorded, so if you really want to listen to it again, Maybe one of those nights when you can't sleep, you just turn it on and that'll help you go sleep. So you will have access to that information. So if you look quickly at the line of duty deaths, on average, somewhere around 130, 140 officers die every year. Line of duty meaning they got killed while they were working, except for 1 year. The year was 2020 and 2021. You see why? You see that the line of duty deaths or death of the officer was so much higher? COVID. And we're going to see that also here in a minute. Since 1776, almost actually right now, over 27,000 law enforcement officers have died. Not of natural causes, but line of duty deaths. This is another way of looking at that. It's kind of a backward way of looking at it, but again, you look at deaths by gunfire, by auto, by medical or other, and you see again in 2021 the medical ones were huge. That's COVID. And here's another different graphic. Oh, it was working wonderfully. Now what happened? It just stopped working. My friends back there. Oh, there it is. Okay. So it's another way of looking at the effect of COVID. That's just that line at the end there of the graph, the red line. Of course, you see how it spiked high because of that. But I'm not talking about line of duty deaths today. I want to talk about the deaths that happen that are not related to line of duty directly. I don't know if you've ever attended a funeral for a police officer who's been killed in a line of duty. Have you ever attended one? It's one of the most amazing experiences. Officers from all kinds of departments come to honor the fallen comrade. Cars lined up sometimes for miles. It's just hundreds, sometimes even thousands of people. I've had the unfortunate experience probably about 7 times in the 40 years that I've been a law enforcement chaplain. So it's a wonderful way to honor the colleague who's been killed. But what happens to the law enforcement officer who retires and then later dies of a natural cause? Nothing happens. It's just a regular funeral. And so that's the reason that I want us to talk about this. So let me just go back to one. The question that many people ask when they are diagnosed with a terminal illness is why? Why is this happening to me? Why am I the one who's sick? And the reality, and I think there was another presentation this morning, the reality is that if we try to answer the question, does it really satisfy? If I could give you the best theological response to the question why, does it lessen the pain that you're feeling today? It doesn't. So it's not really necessary to do that. So that's not the point of the presentation today, to try to answer the question why, but rather to try to minister to the people who are going through a terminal illness. You remember the story of Job. When he was ill, his friends came and sat with him for 7 days, and we've always said that's probably the best thing that they could have done. It's only when they opened their mouth that things begin to go south. But when they just sat and listened to Job, they ministered. When you talk about the ministry of presence, that's what they were doing. But then they decided that they needed to straighten him out and show him why he was suffering what he was suffering. What Job did at the same time is something that is very helpful. One of the things that we said in hospice is pain shared is pain divided. That's what the value of counseling as well. When we vent our feelings, our pain, our sorrow, it lifts it up and shares it among others. So the best thing that we can do to anyone who is terminally ill or their loved ones or the survivors is to listen. Now, you just don't sit there and You know, there is an active listening that has to take place. But it's much better than to say, well, you know, your husband died, but God had a plan for that. There must be a reason why you lost your children. Those things just don't help at all. Okay, this clicker is not gonna drive me crazy here. There you go. All right, so when it comes to listening, what kinds of things are practical to consider? Consider the setting. I have a little bit of hearing loss for a number of reasons, including shooting guns with cops, not shooting people, I say shooting guns. They took me on training and they didn't give me proper protection, so I lost of my hearing doing that. So when I'm in the middle of a big room with a lot of people talking, it's very difficult for me to hear or to at least understand what people are saying. When I sit in a room with someone who is dying of a terminal illness, it's a lot better. It's quieter and I can listen to them. I don't have to shout. They don't have to shout. We can hear. So consider the setting where you are talking to people. Your eyes send a message. If someone is talking to you and you're looking at your phone because it just, you got that last text message, the message that you're giving is, I'm not paying a word of attention to you. It doesn't matter what you're saying, how important you may be, I'm not listening, which, by the way, is important even to us, especially in our families. For a while, I was the ministerial director in the Minnesota Conference, and as I was talking to my pastors one time, I said, make sure that your phone is off when you're with your family, or at the very least, don't answer it. Because if you answer the phone every time that it rings, the message that you're sending to your family is, whoever is calling is more important than you. Is that the message that you want to send to your wife and to your children, or to your spouse and to your children? And so when you're visiting a patient and suddenly, or a member of the church or someone that's dying of a terminal illness, and the phone vibrates or rings and you answer it, you're giving them the message, I am not that important. So make sure that you keep eye contact with them. Okay. Is this a good time? We think that when we visit someone of a terminal illness that we should have a goal in mind, that we should have an agenda, and that's the last thing that we should have. The agenda is set by the patient. And so is this a good time to talk? I would visit my patients, my hospice patients, and we would talk about whatever, the weather, the football game, but sometimes they wanted to talk about their illness. I remember one patient when I was a hospice chaplain in Virginia, who said to me, I like when you come visit me. When my pastor comes, he wants to talk about all kinds of things except me. He wants to talk about the weather. He wants to talk about politics. He wants to talk about whatever. I said, well, maybe he's uncomfortable. How comfortable are you talking about death and dying? If you're not, you have to learn to be comfortable. But there are times when they don't want to talk about death and dying. They want to talk about something else. So is this a good time to do so? I can hear you. I understand or try to understand some of the things that you're telling me. But when I don't, please tell me more. Those are the kinds of things that I want to know. But here's one that I think is very important. There is great value in silence. Sometimes you ask a question and just stop and listen. If I were to stop now for a little while, it would make us all uncomfortable until maybe someone would say something. In group dynamics, we do that. We have a question and wait, and everybody starts looking at each other until someone finally says something. Well, there's value in silence. It makes everyone a little bit uncomfortable, including you. Don't give in to the temptation to then immediately say something, because you may just be breaking that opportunity for them to talk. All right, maybe you guys, there you go. I'm not a rock, and this is important. I spent 2 weeks up in New York City after 9/11 at Ground Zero. After the first week, we did a debriefing for me, because I'm not a rock. I am a human being, and smelling the rotten flesh and the burned wire and dust and all that, it's still with me, 20 some years ago. It affects us. And we have to understand and recognize that there are people that we get very close to, and when they are hurting or when they die, it affects us. So we have to make sure that we check on ourselves and our well-being. Can you give me some feedback, please? What are you thinking? What are you feeling? What are you sensing right now? What are you going through at the moment? It's a good thing to ask yourself, but to also ask the family. I'm done here. There are times when we have to say, look, this is the limit of what my capabilities, the things that I can do. I don't know everything. You ask me a question that's medical, I'm not going to answer that. That's why we have a nurse that comes to see you. That's why we have a doctor that will be able to answer some of those questions. I'm done with my part of the bargain, my expertise. Let me tell you what I think has to do with, there are times when people will ask you a question. You want to know exactly why they're asking the question, but sometimes they do want to have some sort of an answer. So don't always say, well, I can't really respond. When I was working on my master's degree, I remember my teacher told us a joke, I guess it's a joke, about those who are experts in or trained in psychoanalysis, who are told that the goal is to ask questions. Psychoanalysis, you ask questions. And so there was this psychiatrist treating a patient and asking questions. How was it with your mother? How was it with your son? Et cetera, et cetera. And so at some point in time, the patient said to the doctor, is there a restroom here? And the psychiatrist, of course, he can't answer with an answer. You have to ask a question. And so the question was, well, where would you like it to be? Well, no, there's a point in time where you should answer some questions. I want to know what you think, what you feel, what you understand. And you can also share some stories, but be very careful that you don't compare. My wife was diagnosed with breast cancer last year, March 26th of last year. And so we've been going through that journey up until this point. She's doing very well, praise God. I'm very thankful for that. But the things that we have known were going to happen or have happened to others, we were going through those now. The people that would say, my sister had breast cancer too. She died 2 years later. Thank you. That's very encouraging. It really helps us a lot. My mother had that, and she drank water from eucalyptus tree of the 3rd month, and she was cured. All kinds of things that they tell you what to do and drink and all. I know people are well-meaning. I know that. But it's better to not say any of those things, especially when you begin to compare. I know what you're feeling because I went through that. No, it's not your wife. It's my wife. It's not your mother, it's my mother. It's not your brother, it's my brother. So let's make sure that we can talk about some events, some things, maybe to illustrate a point, but not to compare what they're going through. And laughter to me is a wonderful, truly wonderful bit of medicine. And so your visits with terminally ill patients don't always have to be somber and sad. There are many good times as well. In fact, it's not just the terminally ill. When I was a chaplain in Minnesota, I got a call from an officer that someone had died, and could the chaplain come? So I went to their home, and before they could retrieve the man's body, the funeral home, I was working or visiting with the family, and I noticed that the daughter, she was probably in her mid-20s, she was very quiet. Everybody seemed to be talking about dad and the husband and all that, but she was very quiet, and I just thought, So I said to her, I bet you were your daddy's daughter, or your daddy's little girl. That's all that she needed. She just burst crying, and then she told me the story how he would chase her with a hose sometimes into the house and play games with her and all that. I told my daughters that story, and my daughter said, you're so mean, Dad. Why would you do that? I said, she needed that. She needed to vent. She was holding back because she didn't want her mother to see that she was crying. And so sometimes it's humor. That wasn't humorous. It just happened to be a good question. But sometimes some funny story comes to the table, and you don't say, no, John is dying. Let's not laugh. No, it may be just what everyone needs. So the question that I ask is, what would be things that a law enforcement officer would or might want to talk about? If you were involved in law enforcement, well, what did they talk about is war stories. In fact, even probably among the military, the same thing. You get together with hospice personnel, and we talk about that one patient and that other patient. So we have some things in common. Law enforcement officers, the same thing. They have stories in common. I was just riding with a state trooper the other day, and he was telling me what the policy is in the state of Missouri when it comes to pursuits. If you've never been in a police pursuit, it's one of the scariest things you'll ever have in your life. You watch those things on TV and they sound like fun or they look like fun. They're the scariest thing. Not so much because of maybe the other person is going to shoot at you. It's because of all the crazy people on the road who don't realize they have a police car behind going and who knows how fast, and they cross to the other side and hit the police car. All those things go through my mind when I'm in a pursuit. I've been in 3 pursuits. The state of Missouri has a policy that when the chaplain or ride-along is on board, they don't use that car to pursue, which is very frustrating for cops because they want to be the first, but they have to go at the speed limit because they have a ride-along. So I'm grateful for that part. But we get to compare those things. I told him I've been in 3 pursuits. We crashed in 1, and so he wanted to know, we compare war stories. So what happens to someone who is diagnosed with a terminal illness? Well, we have to learn to live with the reality. Move on. There you go. Now, you have heard Elizabeth Kubler-Ross has become, well, for many years has been very famous for the stages of grief. It's actually very unfortunate that the word stages has been used. And that's why I have there the stages or reactions. I think it would be better to call them reactions. The reason is very unfortunate is because it has become to be understood that people go through the stages in a chronological, linear fashion. So you're diagnosed and you first have shock and denial, and then you have anger, then you have bargaining, and eventually you get to the point where you accept it. My brother died of leukemia, and he never came to acceptance. So what does that mean? So don't think of the stages as if they were steps that people normally take one after the other. And you may be looking and to see if they are in the 3rd stage. Okay, that means they're going to move to the next stage. That's not the way that it was intended, nor should ever be used like that. Why? Because if they are reactions, every one of us reacts differently at different times. And some people will go through all of them. Some people will go through only a couple of them. Sometimes they go to one and then go to another and then return to another one. So don't think about that in a linear fashion. That would be a nice, easy, simple way to deal with terminally ill patients. You're here, I can help you get there. That would be the ideal, but it doesn't happen that way. Some people have said that it's more like this. Let me go back to this. That it's more like ups and downs. You may go through anger and then denial, but then more fear and bargaining. But you still have that trajectory toward acceptance, as if that's the ultimate final goal. And again, some people die without ever coming to the place where they accept it. So that's why this to me is actually a better diagram. That means that some people go through some of them, of those reactions. Sometimes they go back to some of them. Some people never experience any of these or some of these things, and some people experience all of those things. Another way of looking at it is how some of these reactions are felt in a greater degree at certain times than others. So you may have a lot of regret and not so much sadness. Or you may have shock, but the anger portion is never present. My brother was never angry, as far as I know. He was just a fighter, and he was convinced until the last day that I'm going to be okay. And then he died. So it wasn't okay, obviously. H. Norman Wright has another way of picturing this, is what he calls a tangled ball of emotions. It's like that. They come and go, and they're all mixed into each other. So don't look at the stages again in a linear fashion that this is what I'm going to be able to take this client or this patient or this person through until they get to acceptance, because we may be ignoring their true need. Instead, one of the things that we suggest you help people go through is what is considered the task of the dying. The people who are dying seem to have a number of things that they want to have accomplished. Number one, they want to ask for forgiveness. I visited a patient one time. In hospice, it's very interesting. We've noticed that patients seem to have in the back of their minds, their subconscious, it's almost as if they decide when and how they're going to die. We can't ask them because once they're dead, we can't talk to them, obviously, and say, hey, did you make that decision at some point in time? I think it's the subconscious. My mother was like that. My youngest brother had a falling off with my mom, and for 2 or 3 years, he had no connection with my mom whatsoever. When she got very ill at the end, we called him because he was completely alienated from the family. So we called him, and we all flew to our homeland to visit with my mom. And when she had seen every one of us, it's like she said, this is all I needed. And the very next day she died. In her mind, she wanted to see her children. We see patients who wait for someone to come, and we see patients who wait for someone to leave. I had a member of my church in Wisconsin. I went to visit her in the hospital. She'd been there for a while. The children were there. As we were visiting, they said, we'd like to get something to eat. I said, just go ahead and go. I'll stay with your mom. While they were gone, and literally within minutes, she passed away. She didn't want the kids to be with her. Some patients make that decision. And there are other patients, again, who is the opposite. They wait until someone or a lot of people come, whoever they're waiting for come, and then they can finally rest. So one of the things that some people want to do or need to do is to ask for forgiveness. They have a strange relationship. They have not talked to someone. They haven't had any kind of connection with someone because of an offense that happened or took place. And that seems to be holding them back. So one of the things we do in hospice is to ask those questions. Is there someone that you need to talk to? Or we ask the family members, is there someone that your husband, your brother, your father, your mother, that they need to talk to? And very often they would say, I remember one of my patients, again in Wisconsin, who hadn't talked to his brother in 20 years. They had had a fight in 20 years. He hadn't talked to his brother. And as he's dying, we called his brother and told him, can you talk to him? I'm telling you, it's almost immediately after the conversation, that sense of relief. And then he died. He needed that. So to ask for forgiveness is one of those tasks. Task number 2 is related to that, and it's to offer forgiveness. So the husband who cheated on the wife, and she's dying, but she can now say, I forgive you. I don't want to hold this against you or anybody else, and then they can rest. Task number 3 is to offer heartfelt thanks. Again, I haven't said this enough. I want to be able to say that. Maybe write it in letters or recordings. I remember the story of the man who was dying, and as his wife was visiting with him, he says to her, remember how 6 months after we were married, we had a car accident and we almost got killed, and for 6 months I couldn't work, but you were there. You were there by my side. And remember how 6 years later, our first house burned down, but you were there by my side. And remember when I was fired from that job that I've enjoyed so much, you were there by my side. And here, I'm dying now, and you're still by my side. You know, you bring me bad luck. No, sorry. I shouldn't have said that. That was not... yeah. But it is good to offer heartfelt thanks, you know, to be able to tell your loved ones how much you love them and appreciate them. Now that we have modern technology, you can do it. Just pick up the phone and do a video recording that you leave for your children or for your family later. Although you don't have to wait till after you die, obviously. Task number 4 is to offer sentiments of love. Again, I want to make sure that you know that I love you. I'm proud of you. I'm happy for you. Task number 5 is to say goodbye. And there's a time when you may have to say, I realize I am dying, and I just want to tell you that I love you. I want to say my goodbyes. I have done everything to prepare, whatever it is, to make sure that you say your goodbye. On the other hand, it's interesting that one of the things we tell families is that you need to give them permission to die. In some cultures, you hang on to your loved one. Please don't leave me. I can't live without you. And what you're doing is holding them back from releasing their life to the natural causes of death, whatever it may be. So one of the things that we tell family members to do is to actually tell them, I give you permission to go on, to die, to rest. I told my mom that on that Wednesday evening. I was the last one to see my mom. I reminded her, she was a Seventh-day Adventist. She knew about the resurrection, the second coming of Jesus, but I wanted to remind her, this is not the end. We will be together again. But I said to her, if this is your time to rest, if this is your time to finally rest, feel free to do so. I'll take care of the family. I'm the only pastor, and at that time, the only Seventh-day Adventist, so I said, I'll take care of the family. Don't worry about them. And next morning, but I did say to her, but I'll come back tomorrow morning. In the hospital there, they won't allow you to stay overnight. So I said, I'll come tomorrow morning. She died at 5 in the morning. She's one of those that didn't want to have the kids with her. But I was able to tell her, it's okay. You can go ahead and go. So it's good to be able to say goodbye, but it's also good to say to your loved one, it's okay for you to rest. Yes, we are going to miss you. Yes, we love you. Yes, life won't be the same, but we'll be okay. Go ahead and get your rest. Now, there are some common experiences, and I want to go through this fairly quick as well. The physiological process of dying I'm going to cover here in a moment. But there's also an emotional process of dying. Imagine all the losses that the person is experiencing. Maybe loss of mobility, maybe loss of a job, maybe loss of relationship, maybe financial losses. So emotionally, it can be a very difficult thing to bear. Those are the things that you have to be aware. That's what people have called total pain. When you have physical pain, if you have something like bone cancer, which is very, very painful, every movement is excruciatingly painful. You have social pain. What kind of social pain do people have who are terminally ill? Isolation. I like to see them, but what if they ask me a question? What if I don't know what to say? And so they are mostly isolated as they need the support of society. They're actually having to do this thing almost by themselves. Psychological pain, of course, spiritual pain as well. And here I need to just stop for a second and talk about anticipatory grief. And that's the type of grief that we experience before the person even dies. A very good close friend of mine just lost his mother after she had Alzheimer's for about, I think, 14 years, a long, long, long time. And I know in talking to him before she died, he would say to me, it's so depressing to go see her. Her body's there. She looks like my mom, but she's not there. Well, she died. And then I was talking to him and I says, the craziest thing is I'm not crying. I don't know why I'm not hurting like I thought I would be. And I said, well, that's because you've been grieving all along. It's anticipatory. You're experiencing it beforehand. But what happens is then those good, well-meaning people will come to them and say, they probably didn't love her. He probably didn't love her too much because he's not crying, without realizing he's been crying all along. He's been suffering all along until now. It's almost like the grief is completely gone. Although I did say to him, it may not be all gone. The right trigger one day will allow you to then do your grief. So don't just think I'm going crazy because I'm not crying. No, it's not the right time. In fact, I said to him, you may still be in ministerial role. You may still preparing the funeral, the memorial service, and ministering to the family. So you may still be playing the ministerial role, which is to support the family. But once all of that is over, one day it'll happen. I remember for me, after I had the funeral for my mom and everyone went back home and all that, I remember one day I was at home there in Wisconsin. I don't know what came to me, but I thought I wanted to watch a movie that's called Saving Private Ryan. Have you ever seen that movie? So you remember the scene when they're coming to tell Mrs. Ryan that 2 of her boys were killed in battle, and you see that car coming down the path. That's when it happened to me. I just started bawling, but that's what I needed. Up to that point, I'd been in ministerial mode, helping, ministering to others. By myself, that picture, that's what I needed. And so don't negate, just beware of anticipatory grief. It's something that some people go through, and don't criticize them because you think they're not grieving after everything happens. Let's see here. I want to talk about treatments. There are different types of treatments. You're probably aware of them. Curative treatments, of course, you're receiving, whether it be chemotherapy or radiation or hormone treatment. You're trying to do those things to help the person receive a cure. Palliative care is care to help the person feel comfort or to be a comfort. You can still receive treatment as a cure, but the main focus is to make the person comfortable. But then you have another option, which is home hospice or institutional hospice or hospital hospice. Interestingly enough, some people think that hospice is people giving up. But you know that statistically, some people actually live longer when they are in hospice care than when they are in a hospital. And you have to understand, hospitals are busy places. When you're at home and you're the one taking care of your loved one, and then you have a team to assist you, they may be more comfortable. Now, there are some people who would say, I don't want to die at home. That's perfectly all right. You make that choice, that decision. And there are people who would do the opposite, say, I do want to die at home. Others would say, I don't want to die at home. I don't want to die at home. I don't want to leave that memory at home. So if it was up to me, I'd rather die in an institutional hospice if it were to happen to me. But those are options that people have and that maybe you can make them aware of if they are diagnosed with a terminal illness. I don't know if you know what the qualification to be in hospice is, but basically if a doctor says that you have 6 months or less to live, then you qualify for hospice. And that's the kind of the time frame, the 6 months or less. If they just say, well, you have a terminal illness, that doesn't mean that you qualify for hospice care immediately. It's the 6-month period. Of course, that's a guess. I remember we had a patient that had lung cancer, and the 6 months went by, and so then he had to requalify, and another 6 months went by, and he still made it. He lasted 3 periods, and then he finally died. So it doesn't mean that, how does a doctor know that you're going to die within 6 months? It's the best guess based on the disease that you have. But we're all different. Something's coming. There you go. There are a number of medical decisions and legal decisions which are good to take. And by the way, these are not only good for older people. I'm talking to myself. It's not only for people who are ill, but really every one of us should have certain documents and decisions that we should have made. Advanced care planning, advanced directives, those to me are very important. If anything happened to you today and you were not able to make decisions for yourself, who would make those decisions? Your family. Your family. Would you want your family to make some serious decisions like disconnecting you from life support? That's a horrible thing to ask your family to do. But if I made the decision, then they're just simply following my wishes. It's a little different. So there are a number of things that I have in my advanced directives. If I am not able to take care of myself, if I'm not able to eat or drink, if I am on life support, or if 2 doctors certified that I have no brain life, what's the word I'm looking for? Brain activity, I'm brain dead, if you want to say it that way, then let me die. I don't want to continue hooked up to a machine for the rest of my life. Those are part of my advanced directives, which is different than a will. A will is what happens after you die. I have my will too. And in my will, for instance, one of the things I said to my wife, and she knows and my kids know that very well, I want to be cremated. In fact, I said to my wife, 1, I don't want you to buy a casket and cremate me afterwards. That's a waste of money there. So cremate me as soon as possible and then flush my ashes down the toilet because I always wanted to travel the world anyway. So she said, I will do the cremation. The toilet part is not for consideration. That's your will. That's different. Advanced directives is what you decide before you die, and in case you are not able to make decisions for yourself and someone else has to make them. So what kinds of decisions, how would you decide? First, the person that I want to make care decisions for me when I can't. Who would that be? It would be my wife and my daughters. One of my daughters happens to be a physician, so I think she would be smart enough to know when the time comes. The kind of medical treatment that I want or don't want. For instance, I do not want to be resuscitated. If I'm terminally ill and have a heart attack, I don't want to be resuscitated. I'm already dying of a terminal illness. Let me die instead of force my ribs into my chest, crack them, and then I'm going to be in pain, but I'm still going to die. So do not resuscitate is one of those things. Number 3, coming up. How comfortable I want to be. Again, I want to be hydrated. Maybe some people would say that. I want to receive some kind of nourishment. Some people would say I don't want any of that. How I want people to treat me. All those are things that you can consider and what I want my loved ones to know. Some people actually who are terminally ill already have a plan for their funeral. And some people would say, well, that's crazy. Why would you start talking about? Again, the more decisions that you make while you can, then the fewer your family will have to make when they have to. So you have, again, some of those choices: advanced care planning, advanced directives, medical or healthcare power of attorney, and living will. And they're somewhat related to one another. The best thing is to get a good lawyer to help you with all those papers. Some of them are online. You can download them and just do them yourself. But if you get a good attorney, it also can be very helpful. And again, more on that decision. I'm just going to run through these. Again, you have them in your in the handout, so I won't spend too much reading these. Talked about do not resuscitate. So I want to speak about physician-assisted suicide for a moment. I was a hospice chaplain. I don't believe in suicide, period. Okay, and I have personal reasons for that as well. My wife and I have a dubious distinction of sorts. Her youngest brother, who was a law enforcement officer, a sheriff's deputy, died by suicide at the age of 32 or 3. So suicide is very personal to me. My youngest brother, who had been a law enforcement officer and was in the Air Force as a Air Force Reserve recruiter, died by suicide when he was 50 years old. So both our youngest brothers died by suicide. So I know suicide is not an answer that I think is satisfactory. So I'm already biased. But I have to think about my role as a chaplain. I may not support their decision, but I still have to be their chaplain. I still have to be there to support them. My role is not there to convince them not to do it, but rather to be with them and for them when they need me. So you may not agree with physician-assisted suicide, but just remember your role as a chaplain is to support the person, not support them in what they're doing, support them. And I'll talk more about the book that I have, and I talk more about that. Other decisions that some people have to make, organ donation. Actually, I realize now that cheaper than a cremation is organ donation, especially if you donate your whole body. Because then the hospital takes care of, or the school, the medical school takes care of all the expenses. So that's even cheaper than cremation. It's not that I'm thinking about being cheap or anything. It's just, what does the Bible say? The dead know not anything, so I'm not going to benefit from any of it. I just don't want to take money away from me, or for me, I should say, that could be used for my wife and families. That's the reason why I talk about it that way. But my daughter, being a physician, tells me that when she had a cadaver to work with in medical school, they treat cadavers in a very respectful way. It's not a body that we have to work on. It's a person that is helping us to learn. So when I heard that, I said, well, they can take my body too. That's okay with me. Would you like to have a funeral or a memorial service? More and more nowadays, people are going straight to cremation and having a memorial service instead of a funeral. And some people would say, I don't even want to have a funeral. I just don't want, cremate me and I'm done with that. A graveside service, those kinds of things, of course. So let me just go through the process of dying, especially those of you who are in hospital or hospice settings would understand some of these things. So first, there's a decline toward death. Obviously, you've been diagnosed and you begin to see the effects of whatever disease that you have. 1 to 3 months prior to death, you will begin to experience behavioral and psychological changes. You may be more tired than you used to be. Maybe you sleep a lot more than you used to be, than you used to feel. Maybe you're eating less than you used to. Physical changes, obviously your blood pressure, your heart rate begin to change too. Even your color begin to change. Your skin begins to look differently. 1 to 2 weeks prior to death, you may see also a few things, and I want to talk about the last sense for a reason, but let me just get back to some of the mental changes. In some cases, some terminally ill patients begin to look like they are in what I call a semi-comatose state. They stare at the ceiling or the walls a lot. But I do want you to notice that last sense. In hospice, we talk about, and not just in hospice, but in terminal illness in general, we believe that the last sense a person loses is hearing. So be very careful what you say in front of the patient. Boy, she doesn't look good at all. Those kinds of things. So be careful what you say. But at the same time, you can use the sense of hearing to encourage them, pray for them. Remember one of my patients in Virginia. My role as a hospice chaplain there were 2 of us, and so my role was to provide a spiritual assessment for all the incoming patients. So I visited all the patients that were just assigned to hospice. So I went to visit this lady, Virginia, I remember was her name, we live in Virginia. And went to see her. We had a good conversation, asked her a number of questions about her faith background, her support system, et cetera, et cetera. And then I said, do you have any questions for me? And she says, yeah, I do have a question. When will I know that I'm ready to die? That's a tough question. I've never been asked that question. How will I know when I'm ready to die? And it's one of those times when I think God illumined me, gave me an idea, and I said, let me ask you this. When you first met your husband, or the guy that's now your husband, if he'd come up to you and said, marry me, what would you have said? And she said, I would have said, you're nuts. I don't even know who you are. I said, yes, but then you started dating, and you got to know each other, and you fell in love with one another, and one day he said to you, would you marry me? And you said, yes, and now you've been married all these years. Is that right? She said, yeah, that's exactly what happened. I said, that's what I think happens with us in a relationship with God. Now, this is a Baptist family, so I knew I could talk in Christian terms. I said, when you talk with Jesus, you get to know him. You fall in love with him. One day, I don't know how it's going to happen, but one day he will say, it's okay to come with me. Now, understand, I don't believe in walking alive after you're dead, but still, maybe in some ways, God says it's okay to rest now. So she said, okay, I can buy that. A few months went by, and I was in the office one day, and her nurse came to the office, and she said, you need to go see, not Virginia, Vivian was her name. She said, you need to go see Vivian. She's actively dying. When we talk about actively dying, they are moving very quickly in the direction of dying. So I don't make a phone call. When she says she's actively dying, I went ahead straight to their house. Her husband opened the door and said, I'm so glad you're here because Vivian is not doing well. I walked into her room. She was, what I would say, semi-comatose, her eyes fixed on the ceiling. I said hello. She looked at me, and she looked back at the ceiling. I sat next to her. I read one of my favorite passages, Psalm 23, and I always make emphasis, though I walk through the valley of shadow of the death, I am, or thou art with me. So you're not alone, Vivian, remember that. And then I had prayer, and she stopped breathing. She died. The last sense, she still could hear. So you can still use that to encourage them and to encourage the family, to encourage them, to talk to them. But when it comes to negative conversation, be very careful what you say in front of a patient, because they can hear it. Again, physical change, especially in respiration. Sometimes you hear this very labored breathing, sometimes very shallow. It's almost uncomfortable, and you think, well, can they do something about it? It's not hurting the patient. At least that's what the doctors and nurses tell me. It's not hurting the patient. It's a very natural thing that they're going through. But just be prepared for that. A couple of days, 2 hours before death, there are a few more things happening. We'll get there. Maybe we won't. Well, last question is, when does death actually happen? Well, when the heart stops and you stop breathing and the doctor or the nurse says, they're done. All right. So what can we do as chaplains to bring hope in a very hopeless situation? What can chaplains do? We talked about the last sense, so encourage them. Boy, I tell you, we'll get there. So here are something to consider, the 5 stages of hope. People sometimes need to hold on to the hope for a cure, especially at the beginning of a terminal illness, or at least of the diagnosis. So they hold on to the hope for a cure. Well, what happens when they're not cured? Then maybe there's a hope for treatment. Maybe, the one I heard over there in Europe or in South America, maybe we can go there and get that one treatment. Maybe that'll be the one to help me. Then there's the hope for prolongation of life. Okay, so now there's no treatment that's going to help me, but if I could at least just last long enough to see my daughter graduate from college. So there's another hope that they may have. And then the hope of the dying, which in some ways is, I want to have a comfortable death. I visited a patient of mine. I could see that he was very restless, and I asked him what his fears were, what his fear was, and he said, this death thing. And I said, well, are you afraid of death? Or are you afraid of dying? You know the difference, right? Death is the ultimate result. Dying is the process. And he says, that's what I'm afraid of, that I'm going to be in pain, that I'm going to lose all my bodily functions. I'm not going to have any control over them. Well, we can address those, But he said, I'm not worried about death. I know what's going to happen to me after I die. I'm not worried about that. So we have to understand what they're talking about. And the hope for a peaceful death is something that I think a lot of people want. And one last thing, I'm not even going to worry about getting to that slide. There's a really good book. It's out of print, but I'm sure you can still find it. It's called Final Gifts, written by 2 hospice nurses. One of them is Callanan. Forget her last name, but it's called Final Gifts. And they talk about some of the common experiences that terminally ill people have. Because again, people who are dying of a terminal illness, they seem to dictate how and when they're going to die. But they tell us. I went to see one of my hospice patients, and this was a institutional hospice. And as I walked in the room, they were saying, my uncle is going crazy. He wants to go to Whole Foods. And I said, no, I think he's trying to tell you that he's getting ready to die. Sure enough, that afternoon he was dead. So if you hear your loved one talk about, I need to make my suitcases, I need to get the tickets, and then you start thinking, ooh, they're losing their mind. No, they're telling you, I'm getting ready to die. Something else that they experience. Now understand, I'm a Seventh-day Adventist. I know that the dead know not anything. I know that dead people don't come back to life to talk to us or anything. But I've had patients who will tell us about Aunt Joe or Uncle Joe or Aunt Mary was standing there at the door telling me that they're waiting for me. Yeah. Of course, the reaction, but they've been dead for 15, 20 years. As a Seventh-day Adventist, I know that. It wasn't, in fact, I don't even think it was a spirit. I think in their minds they might have seen something. But I think in their minds they were being prepared to die. And you can say, come on, Dad, Uncle Joe's been dead 15 years. You're seeing things. Or you can encourage them with like, well, what did they tell you? What did they say? Meaning, maybe they're giving us that message that I'm preparing to die. So pay attention to those kinds of messages from the terminally ill, because that may be what you need to help them die a comfortable death. So now we have time for some questions. Very limited, but we'll do what we can. So if you have a question, just raise your hand and I'll be glad to try to answer it. And if not, I'll let other chaplains answer the questions. Thank you. There's a microphone. We have a runner too. Thank you.
Sorry, me, it's not a question per se. I just want to find out how we get hold of this material.
So the whole presentation is right here.
Okay, thank
So
you.
on the way out, you can get it. And by the way, there's something else. If you would like to, we did write a book called Helping Write the Final Chapter. You can get it in Advent Source. By the way, I'm going to tell you this. I don't get any royalties because we wrote it while we worked for the North American Division. So by policy, I don't get royalties. So I'm not going to get any money out of this. I'm not selling it so I can become rich. I'm already rich. No. So if you're interested, Advent Source has the book for about $15, $16 plus shipping and handling. Or if you have $10 today, you can have, I have a few copies. So cash only, by the way. So on the way out, after we finish, if you're interested, I have a few copies. For those of you who may be interested, the book is also in Spanish and French. Helping Write the Final Chapter, the same title as the presentation. But the printout of the slides is up front. That's free. I won't charge you anything because I didn't pay anything for it anyway. So, any other questions?
Yes. So this is definitely a gap in my own ministry. So that's why I'm attending this. I'm just wondering how we reconcile the hope for cure, the hope for treatment, and the releasing the person and having them say, okay, it is okay for you to go. How do you reconcile those two?
So what I'm saying here is that people seem to go through different stages of hope. If they're saying, I hope for a cure, I'm not going to say, no, you're dying of a terminal illness. Just let yourself die. I have to respect their hope. Okay? So the reason I say that is so that you're aware that people go through different stages of hope. At first, I want to be cured. Well, now that I'm not being cured, then I hope maybe someone has another treatment that I can try. So again, that's all I'm saying is that be aware that people go through different stages of hope. But at the end, when they may realize that there is no hope, then what other hope can you give them? As a Seventh-day Adventist, we have lots of other hope. This is not the end. To me, it's very interesting. We believe in the second coming of Jesus. We believe in the resurrection. We believe that the dead know not anything. And, in fact, I tell you this story. Does anyone know who Jose Rojas is? Yes. Yeah, I know. Jose Rojas, the speaker, the preacher, the guy with the long mustache, great singer. You know he died 3 years ago? He died 3 years ago. I just talked to him 2 weeks ago, by the way. He was clinically dead. He was clinically dead. So, but they brought him back to life. So you probably thought I was losing my mind. I saw a ghost. No. He's still alive now. But I had to ask him, Jose, did you see the light? You know how people say, oh, when they died, they saw the light. And Jose, did you see the light? He said, nah, I didn't see any light. He says, but I had the most peaceful feeling I have ever had in my life. So it's the one person that I know who has actually died who has been able to tell us what it is like to die. Bible tells us you go to sleep and that's the end of that. So why are we so afraid of it? Why are we so attached to life that we continue holding on to one treatment and another cure. But at some point in time, we have to come to the acceptance of, I'm going to die. But that's not the end. That's not the end for us as Christian believers.
My name is Joshua Dionarai, and I'm from the Northeastern Conference. In the same vein of the advanced directives, which relates to the medical decisions that have to be made, have you considered spiritual directives? And I'm thinking about directives of my funeral service.
Sure.
Who will preach?
Yeah.
Who will read the obituary,
Right.
et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And what guidance can you give about that?
Yeah, so I mentioned that some people actually plan their own funeral before they die, and some people might think, well, that's kind of somber, and that's kind of weird and all that. But if you're comfortable, I know of people who have done that. They've sat with the family and said, hey, I know I'm going to die, so let's plan on it. And some people will plan it as a celebration of life. That's become very common. Some people will just simply call it a remembrance of life. But my favorite song is this. And I want my pastor from so-and-so. And I want my cousin to read this. It's perfectly all right. In fact, I want this dress. If I'm going to be in a casket, I don't want the casket open, or I want it open. I want this dress or this suit or this tie or whatever. We can make all those decisions so the family doesn't have to make them. Yeah, I think she's got the microphone there.
Thank you. I'm Deirdre Griffith. I work at Grady Memorial Hospital in Atlanta, Georgia. It is the only level 1 trauma center in the city of Atlanta. So we get a lot of teenagers with gunshot wounds to the head and trauma. I wondered if there was any tools you had for me separate from the chronic illness and people gradually dying, as opposed to a traumatic injury and death.
You mean for the family, obviously?
Yes, something that as a chaplain I could do to help the families who are grieving the sudden loss of their 15-year-old who got shot in the head and things like that.
I don't have any myself, not that we've created, and I'm trying to think. I mean, I work with the FBI, so we deal with a lot of traumatic things. ICISF, International Critical Incident Stress Foundation, they have a lot of materials on working with peers and like peer support, debriefings, all those things. But I'm trying to think right off the bat what I could advise you or encourage you to do. Maybe somebody else, one of you chaplains who works in that situation. I can't think of one right now that would say, hey, this would be a good resource to give you. Yeah. All right, so I think there's one more question, and then I think I need to let you go.
Mine is a comment about the advanced directives, because I am doing advanced directives for my hospital. The first page is designation of the surrogate or proxy, and the second page is the living will. And in the living will, there are options yes or no. When you come to a point that the two physicians determine that you have an end-stage condition and you are unable to express your wishes or make healthcare decisions for yourself. So there are choices there, and also like, additional choices like they want to be in a palliative care, blah, 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 or hospice care. Now, when it comes to your question, in the first page, designation of surrogate, there is a special space there that says, do you have additional information or instructions with regards to maybe a personal belief, religious beliefs, or any additional instructions that you want to include there? Then you can actually put your concern there, because you will get the original copy and a photocopy for your primary surrogate.
Okay, we have just 2 questions, and then we need to stop. One here and one here.
So mine is just a contribution regarding the hope. When he asked the question, when we reconcile hope for cure or treatment and that kind of thing. So as I'm a hospital chaplain, and I realized that anytime every dying patient has, as he taught us now, a connection to hope somewhere, and the chaplain would have to connect to that. And there are some I have experienced who would just say, I want to connect to God. There are some who just want, I want anointing. I want a last rite. When you do that, immediately they give up and they are gone. Now, as I speak with you, I have a current patient who is a minister, and he's 50 years old, and he has been admitted at the hospice. But to him, he believes that he will be healed and wants prayer for that. So at this moment, I am not praying for him to die, and he gives me the scriptures as we talk, telling me that he believes that God is capable of healing because there's nothing impossible. And so that is where I have met him, and I am praying with him. And I just want to say that as all of you are here, let us pray for him. He's called Douglas. Tell God that this is what he wants and this is what he believes. I believe that God is capable of doing that for him. He wants. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, yeah. And keep in mind in thinking about that you have to be careful not to instill false hope by saying things to them. The church is praying for your healing. Things will be all right. You're going to be fine. That's instilling maybe false hope, so you have to be very careful. But here's another question. So I know you want to be healed. You want a miracle to happen. If a cure didn't happen, what other miracle could happen instead? Because maybe the miracle would be that I would be reconciled with family members that we don't have a connection with. Or maybe the miracle is that I realize my wife and my kids will be fine financially, which is one of my concerns. So we don't have to just discredit miracles altogether, but maybe you're asking for a miracle, but maybe God can provide a different one. So one last question.
Como capellanes, soy un capellán que normalmente siempre estoy cerca del duelo y de la muerte.
As a capellan, I am a chaplain. I always close to people who's dying and people who's having pain.
Cómo lograr mantener ese equilibrio entre no perder la sensibilidad, porque a veces cuando uno trata mucho con el duelo y la muerte puedes perder la sensibilidad, y tampoco caer en el sufrimiento, el dolor como capellán. Entonces, ¿cómo mantener ese equilibrio?
How can we have an equilibrium between the pain or the grieving process, the family, as a chaplain too, to avoid that can affect us as a chaplain working with them?
How do we keep a balance between working with someone who is suffering and also maintaining hope, making sure that, thank you, that we don't suffer the pain, absorbing their pain? Okay. So one of the things that we said is we have to make sure we check with ourselves and with our support team. If I'm so involved with a patient that this is really bringing me down, I need help. I can't be the hero and hurt myself in the process. So you have to also be aware, this is affecting me, so I need to seek help. Okay. Well, thank you so much. So again, if you would like a copy of the presentation, and the book is $10, cash.
10?
Yes. Thank you. Who gave me the $10?